Hey everyone! Thank you for joining us on this episode of WIT Talk. My name is Nicole Smith. I'm going to be taking over WIT Talk and WIT's Guide to STEAM from now on. Today we are here with Miss Long. She is the Chief Human Resource Officer here at UAH. And we're going to talk about how authenticity applies to Miss Long. Let's get started. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
Awesome.
To begin, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Oh my gosh, how far back do you want me to go? So I am originally from the Bahamas. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
So I'm originally from the Bahamas. I moved here when I was 12. Mm-hmm. So I finished my high school and college here. I did my undergraduate degree in accounting, surprisingly. And I thought I was going to be this fantastic certified public accountant. Mm-hmm. It was going to change the world, all of that, until I realized that I hated accounting.
Oh, wow.
So through a series of interesting events, I ended up taking on a role that had HR as part of its job duties, and I realized that I really liked that better than accounting.
Sure.
So I did some career redirection, and I went and got my certification, and as they say, the rest is history.
Wow, that's awesome. You touched a little bit on your early education, but can you go into more detail about that?
Sure. So I did my elementary years in actually Jamaica, born in the Bahamas, but I was raised in Jamaica, so I had that kind of British background. Mm-hmm. A little bit of shock to my system when I moved to the States. I was the youngest person that had ever been in the 9th grade. I was only 12 years old. So that was an interesting experience. Graduated high school when I was 16.
Wow.
Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I'd always been told, that I was just like my dad, mm-hmm. looked like him, acted like him. And he is a finance professional, so it was just natural for me to do accounting.
Right. It's hard to make those decisions so young, even at
Exactly.
18.
I always say to people now, never push your kids ahead of where they are, because I had no business being in college at 16 years old. But that's a whole different podcast. But anyway, so I went to a school in southern Michigan called Andrews University. It's a private Christian college. Mm-hmm. And I did 4 years of accounting there. And then when I finished, I started working actually for public radio, for a public radio station
wow. Cool.
that's owned by the Miami-Dade County Public School System. So I started working there. And the lady that I was working for, she was a director of finance and administration. I mean, just wonderful person. She's still my mentor to this day. But she was planning to retire, and I guess saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and started training me to take on her role when she retired. And she had responsibility for HR in that role.
Oh, wow.
So when I moved into her role and I started doing that, I said, wow, I really like this aspect of my job better than the other aspect, which was interesting because I am naturally an introvert. So a lot of people are even shocked that I have HR and, as a career progression. But I absolutely love it. I can't even envision myself doing anything else. So I served in that role for a while in Florida. Then we moved here. And I've been working at UAH ever since we moved here in 2001. I didn't start out in this role, though. I started out as a director. I had a weird title. It was Director of Training, Compliance, and Compensation, some made-up title. But then have progressed to this role, which I've been in since 2007.
Awesome. I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about authenticity and what it means to you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So it's one of my favorite words, because what I've discovered over the years is that you don't really have to compromise who you are to be successful. Mm-hmm. If you're really true to yourself and true to what you're passionate about, and true to your values and true to what you believe, over time, life will reward you for that. I've seen so many times people fail, if you will, because they try to morph into a personality that they think people want or they think that will be successful. But I think if you're just authentic, meaning that you're really true to who you are and you explore your innate talents and abilities and what brings you joy, mm-hmm. and the values that are important to you, if you stay true to that, the world will reward you for that. The universe will reward you for that.
Right.
And so you don't have to compromise. So authenticity is something that I strive for consciously all the time.
Right, right.
Even when it's hard.
Yeah. Do you feel like that was something that you had to learn, or do you think you were born with this sort of affinity for authenticity?
That is a fantastic question because I've thought about that. And I think it's something that I discovered after making some mistakes, right?
Right.
So one of the difficult things in my leadership journey was because I've always been the younger person in every cohort, I always felt like I had to compromise, right? So when I first took on a leadership role, I was leading people, everybody was older than me. So I thought I had to morph into this personality to be liked or to lead effectively. And that's the quickest way to crash and burn. So really, after making some big mistakes, I had to step back and say, you know what, Laurel, if you just focus on who you are, and focus on the best parts of who you are. I used to hate for people to call me nice, right? Because I thought, nice is really a pejorative word. Who wants to be nice? I want to be that person that when they walk in the door, everybody starts shaking. You know what I mean? But that's not me. That's not who I am.
Right.
But when I focus on bringing out the best parts of who I am, then it was just a much better life experience. So to answer your question specifically, no, I didn't always have that. It's something that has evolved over time, and it took some mistakes for me to get there.
Right. What advice do you have for people that are sort of developing the same affinity for authenticity?
Another great question. So I would say take time to do some self-reflection. Think about, really take time to think about what are the things that bring me joy? What is important to me? What are my values? What's my deeper yes? What is my North Star? What's the thing that guides me?
Yeah.
And when you understand that, stay true to that. Even in the hard moments, stay true to that. Because over time, you'll just experience a lot more peace, a lot more joy. And one of my favorite authors is Stephen Covey. And he talks about this concept of the circle of influence versus the circle of concern. So if you focus on your circle of influence, which are the things that you are directly in control over? I can't control my husband, even though I've been trying for 33 years. It hasn't worked, right? I can't control my child. I can't control the people I work with. I can only control me. But Dr. Covey says if you focus on that circle, no matter how small it seems to be in the beginning, if you stay true to that circle, over time it will expand. And your influence will expand. Your circle will expand. You get to touch more people. But if you focus all your energies on that outside circle, it has the opposite effect. So the advice I would give is to focus on who you are. Stay true to who you are, even when it seems like it's not paying off, because over time it absolutely will. And your circle will expand, and you'll start to have more influence, and you'll start to touch more people.
Right.
And it's just a life principle that's true in every situation.
Right. That's awesome. Okay, yeah, so let's dive back into authenticity a little bit. And how do you think authenticity applies in your human resources office? Or in human resources in general, not just here at UAH?
Great question. So I tell my team all the time that the thing that makes us successful as HR practitioners is integrity. We have to have integrity in everything that we do, but people have to also see that and trust us to have that. And the way to have integrity is to be authentic. It's to be honest. It's to be transparent. It's to be open. It's to communicate. It's to be vulnerable. All of those things make us authentic. And when we are authentic, then we really have a level of integrity that makes us successful. The quickest way to fail as an HR practitioner is for people to not trust you. And if you're inauthentic, they will not trust you, right? So I believe that authenticity is fundamental to what we do as HR practitioners. You cannot separate successful HR from an authentic life experience. You have to have that.
And let's dive back into, I want to know more about you.
Sure.
Okay? Sure. So I did look at a few of your profiles. Okay. I did a little click.
Googling? You Googled me?
Yes, I did. I want to talk more about how it was for you to be in college at such a young age. Because like I said earlier, like it's very hard to even know yourself at 18, right, let alone 16. Me at 16, no way.
Right.
So can you talk about that a little bit more?
So there were pluses and minuses, right? And I don't want to discount any of it because the totality of that experience has made me who I am. Mm-hmm. On the downside, there was some bullying involved. So, I was a 12-year-old kind of freak of nature kind of person. So people would come up to me in high school, "Are you really 12 years old?" That kind of thing. But it also gave me this real sense of independence and internal strength, if you will, because I just had to depend on that because I wasn't, the popular girl or, I was like this nerdy 12-year-old that everybody looked at like, is she normal kind of thing? But it really taught me to have an internal strength that I draw on even now. But looking back, I would have preferred not to be a 16-year-old in college or a 12-year-old in the 9th grade because I don't think I was emotionally mature enough for that. But again, hindsight is 20/20, and I don't fault my parents for that at all. And it's made me who I am. But I would be lying if I said it wasn't a challenging experience.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine. When was the turning point for you in accounting to say, you know what, I actually don't really like this? Because I think a lot of college students really struggle with that and finding themselves in that way, and then they get scared, and then they fall into that inauthenticity kind of situation. Absolutely.
So after I graduated and I went to Miami, I started working at WLRN, and my job was in finance and administration, and I just didn't have any joy in what I was doing. I was doing the work, and I at that point, I didn't know at that point I didn't have joy. But where I am now and looking back, and I can see that the experience was so different, but it just was not something that was fulfilling for me. Mm-hmm. But as I started working through the HR piece of it and interacting with people and doing the HR work, that part was so much more interesting to me than preparing income statements and balance sheets. And I was like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. But to go back to your point about authenticity, I never even dared to speak up to probe whether or not accounting was something I wanted to do because it was just something I was told I was going to do. Right. So coming back to the young age, being young, I didn't even know that I had a choice to do something other than accounting until I was much older. So that experience really changed how I dealt with my daughter because when she was growing up, I told her, take all the time you need to figure out what you want to do. Right. We're not going to prescribe that for you. And so my experience changed how I dealt with her. So now she's on a path that's totally her own, which I think is fantastic, without us telling her what she has to be. Mm-hmm.
I want to actually know more about the dynamic, because I know you described yourself as an introvert earlier. How do you think that has affected you in the HR department of your career? Do you think it's made it more challenging for you, or do you think you benefit from it?
That's a great question. Fantastic question. And the answer is both. So I'll start with how I think it's been a little bit of a drawback. Mm-hmm. Being an introvert, I'm not naturally a gregarious, outgoing person, right? I have to, it's like cranking up like an engine, right? I have to crank myself up to put myself in that space to be gregarious. So that's a muscle that I've had to exercise. It's unlike my husband. He can wake up happy. I'm like, you are not normal. Normal people do not wake up happy. But the way that it's helped me is by being an introvert, it's caused me to be really empathic. Mm-hmm. And I'm really sensitive to people's emotions and how they feel. And I think that it's given me a level of compassion that has made me I won't want to say that I'm successful in my job, but it's made me do my job better because I have that greater sense of empathy and compassion.
Right.
So there's pluses and minuses. So because I've done the work, though, and I know what my blind spot is, I know how I am in the public space and all of that. So I know what I have to work on. But yeah, it's been a benefit, but it has its drawbacks as well.
Right. And I know that we talked about this a little bit before. I asked a similar question, but for introverts specifically, what do you think, what advice would you give them in order to like reconnect with their authenticity or like find that authenticity?
You're just knocking these questions out of the park. Fantastic question. The first thing I would, and I say this in absolute seriousness, whoever's listening to me, being an introvert is not a bad thing. Celebrate your introvert qualities because you are, the world needs you just the way you are, right? And I would also say in the areas where I need a little help because I don't really like socializing and stuff like that, then I call it exercising that muscle. Just put yourself in situations where you have to exercise that muscle more,
right.
Go out, network, even if it's not, your comfort zone. And then over time it gets a little bit better. But the most important thing, though, is not to look down on yourself because you are an introvert. Celebrate that because the world needs you just the way you are.
Right. That's really funny because I feel like when I was younger, I'm still introverted, but when I was younger, I was much more introverted. I wish somebody had been there to tell me what you're telling everyone now. So this is good stuff right here.
As do I. Yes, as do I.
Is there anything else that you would like to add or talk about?
I think I would just in the personal space, just talking about the concept of authenticity.
Yes.
If I could say anything to any of the young people that are listening right now, because I want to just continue on I think that's an amazing point to end on. We don't have to compromise who we are to fit in or to be successful. And I know that sounds kind of trite sometimes, but it is so true. Just be true to who you are. Celebrate who you are. The world needs everybody, right? I use the analogy of a garden. You can't have a garden of just roses, right? You need some carnations, you need some daisies, you need some bluebells, you need some sunflowers, you need a little bit of everything.
Right.
So don't ever feel like you have to modify who you are to fit in. The world needs you just the way you are.
Wow, that's awesome. So I want to talk a little bit more about the HR environment. First of all, how long have you been working in HR?
So I've been in HR, oh my goodness, you're going to make me do math. I've been in HR for about 35 years.
Okay. And I'm sure that you've seen a lot of changes in the industry. Can you talk a little bit about those changes?
So when, HR initially was very transactional. It was where you went to hire people and process payroll and process benefits and so forth. But over time, it has evolved now, with the advancements in technology and, automation and all those kinds of things. All those kinds of tasks that we used to do are not automated. You can handle all of that electronically. Businesses don't need us for that anymore.
I've never thought about that,
Where our value comes in is where we can be strategic partners, where we can advise leadership on the types of workers that they're going to need, how to place them, what's happening in the global workforce. Because right now, the world has changed completely. We have what's called a digital workplace, right? People can work from anywhere at any time. They don't have to come into a brick and mortar building. So it takes a different set of skills to recruit, to pay, to manage that workforce, and to plan for the workforce of the future. So I tell my team all the time, our value doesn't come in being able to handle a piece of paper. It comes in being able to be a strategic partner to leaders at this institution and guide them in terms of their human capital. Because it doesn't matter the mission vision that an organization has. Your human resources are the bridge between what you think you are and what you actually become. So we, human resources, build the infrastructure to help the organization get from where it wants to be to where it actually ends up. So we have a very important role.
Yes, for sure.
Exactly. So our value comes in being able to be more of a strategic partner to the organization than just transactional. And that's how HR is fundamentally changing. It's a whole different skill set that's required now.
Wow, that's awesome. And are there any misconceptions about HR that you would like to address?
Oh my gosh, how many do I want to address? Within HR, we have some self-inflicted wounds because we don't tell our story enough. We don't talk enough about what we do.
Right.
We don't talk enough about the importance of what we do. And so a lot of people think that HR is exactly that. It's where I go to fill out my benefits paperwork and that kinds of things. But we are so much more than that, right? We can do career coaching. We can guide and advise senior leaders. We can scan the landscape, in the global marketplace and see what's going on inside and say, hey, heads up, this is where we think we need to go as an institution. This is what's happening here. So there's so much more that we can do that's beyond the perception of what we are. But, that's our fault. So we have to do a better job of telling that story and getting out and doing things like this so people understand. Let me tell you, I will stand on the rooftop and get everybody to do a major in HR. I've already successfully recruited my niece and my child and everybody else I can get because I want to create more HR practitioners because I just think what we do is phenomenal and is foundational to any organization's success. I'll stop, but you can tell I'm a little bit passionate about that. But that's okay.
You can keep going if you would like. I'm very invested in this. But what advice would you give to students that are looking to practice HR? What kind of career advances? Where should they look for internships and things like that, if you have any information about that?
Great question. So I would say try to find an internship or try to find, even if it's a part-time job, any experience that you get, because then you can test it out and you can say, this isn't for me, or I really like it. And, unlike a lot of other professions, HR rewards experience and longevity. So you're not going to start out making $80,000, $90,000, right? But the longer you're in it and the more experience you have, the more valuable you become.
Right.
So if you get in and you're committed to it and you stick with it, it can be tremendously rewarding. So I would say find an opportunity for an internship or a part-time job or something just to test it out and see if you like it. Right now, we have an opening for 2 work-study students. So if anybody, if there's a work-study student out there that wants an opportunity, give me a call. We're looking.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. So I want to talk a little bit about the different HR environments that you've worked in. Can you go over those real quick?
So I've been in primarily 3 types of environments. So I worked for a private organization, and then I worked for a public school system that owned the NPR station that I worked for, and they were heavily unionized. So I was responsible for managing 5 collective bargaining agreements.
Oh, wow.
And then now I've worked for the University of Alabama in Huntsville, which is a higher education environment, public space, but not unionized. So it's 3 different work environments that I've been in.
Right. Can you speak a little bit about how those HR departments kind of varied from each other and how different they were?
Great question. So in the private environment, you have a lot more autonomy to make immediate decisions, right? Because you don't have like the accountability that you do when you are a public employer. And then when you move into the space where you have a union environment, it's even more challenging because you have to manage according to each different collective bargaining agreement. So each union agreement has different stipulations on discipline and, pay and those kinds of things. So that's a little bit more challenging. Then you come into higher education, which is its own unique ecosystem, because you really have 3 worlds operating at the same time.
Right.
You have the academic side of the house with faculty. That's a whole unique system there. Then you have research, where they have contracts and grants and soft money and a whole lot of compliance issues over there. And then you have everybody else. So to operate within the higher education space, has been the most challenging, but without a doubt the most rewarding, and the one that I enjoy the most.
Right.
But it's just a very different ecosystem, because the needs of faculty, how you recruit faculty, how you reward faculty, how you evaluate faculty, is different from how you do staff, which is different from how you manage research and their needs. Mm-hmm. So it's really a balance of all three of those things, because they have to coalesce in a way that brings value to the organization.
I feel like I've never really heard about like the details of HR, just because I'm in engineering, so we just we don't come into contact very often.
See, now it's a whole new world.
Yeah. I know that you mentioned earlier about how HR is more of a digital space now. How do you think HR could stay innovative?
Great question. So I think there's a few things that we need to do. I said one thing that I don't think human resource practitioners have done well, which we can do better to stay innovative, is that we have to understand the business that we're in. I spend a lot of time reading about higher education generally outside of HR. I want to understand what's happening with enrollment patterns. I want to understand what's happening with funding patterns. I want to understand what's happening in the compliance and regulatory space. I want to understand all of that.
Right.
Because when I understand that, I can do a better job of understanding what our needs are now and what the needs are going to be in the future and the challenges that we're going to have to navigate. Right. So one of the things that we can do to stay innovative and effective is making sure we understand the business that we're in. We can't just focus on very narrowly on the job that's in front of us. We have to understand the business that we're in. And then we have to understand the larger global marketplace. Mm-hmm. We are competing against people, several countries away. We're competing with employers across the United States. Mm-hmm. We're not just competing in Alabama anymore. Right. So we have to expand our thinking. We have to move beyond old methodologies and old ways of doing things. And we have to think differently. Otherwise, we're not going to get the best. We're going to get what's left. So we have to be more on top of what's happening and pay attention and keep our skills up and make sure that we're understanding the business we're in, that we're understanding changes in the global marketplace, we're understanding our competitors, and we are understanding the challenges that are, because the labor force is changing, right?
Right.
Baby boomers are going to be retiring, they're moving on. You've got to understand how to manage millennials and Gen Z and all the others, because the needs are different, mm-hmm. right? What they want are different from, what my generation or my parents' generation want. Right. So we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we stay current and effective and innovative. Right.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask kind of a similar question when you were talking about different generations. Mm-hmm. I know that, like you said, there's going to be generations replacing other generations and things like that. What do you wish that they taught students in school that you think is going to be timeless in regards to the HR environment?
Oh my gosh, that is a fantastic question. I have to come back to how we started this podcast, mm-hmm. which is really being authentic.
Right.
And first knowing who you are, mm-hmm. knowing what you're good at, and pursuing that without apology.
Right.
And being true to who you are. And someone might argue with me and say, well, Laurel, you can't teach that in college. And I would respectfully disagree. I think we can teach that. We can model that. Mm-hmm. Because, there's no other option for success at this point.
Right.
There really isn't.
Right.
And the world is changing so much and so fast. We have to create more than doers. We have to create critical thinkers and people who understand and are willing to explore and willing to take chances and willing to make mistakes and willing to innovate and create and do things. But you can't do any of that unless you have the comfort in knowing, you know what, I'm okay with who I am and I'm going to pursue this path. Mm-hmm. Even if I trip and fall and make a mistake, that's okay.
So I think that's all I have for you. Before we go, I wanted to ask what the best way to get in contact with you would be.
Sure. I'm super easy to find if you go to www.uah.edu And you can go to Human Resources. My contact is right there. Or really easy, longl@uah.edu. You can shoot me an email, but I'm super easy to find.
Okay, I think that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much to Miss Long for joining us, and thank you for tuning in. See you next time on WIT Talk.